I really can't live like this anymore, but I can't stop today. I'll just have a drink, I'll just have a line of coke, and then and tomorrow we'll look at this as a serious proposition. And of course that's...
Picture this. Eric Clapton sits alone backstage, his Stratocaster resting on his lap, cigarette smoldering beside a half-finished glass of whiskey. The stage is quiet now, but in his mind there's music. Voices, not just any voices. Female voices that haunt him, heal him, and hold him in place. The women who shaped the way he listened, the way he played. Clapton's career has always been about emotion. Bleeding fingers, broken hearts, blues soaked in sweat. But behind that masculine bravado was always reverence. And when he speaks of the women who moved him, it's with awe. Here are the 6 women who left the deepest imprint on Slowhand's soul. And first, there was one voice that cracked through the noise like a storm with no warning. Janice Joplin. She wasn't polished, she was pure electricity. When Clapton first heard Janice sing, it was like hearing someone break open on stage. There was no filter, no fear. She didn't care if her voice cracked, she cared if it cut. And it always did. They moved in the same circles in the late 16s, crossing paths in San Francisco and backstage at blues festivals. One wild night at the Fillmore, Janice asked Clapton if he wanted to jam. He declined, nervous, in awe. He later admitted it was one of his biggest regrets. They shared more than a few chaotic nights in the Haight-Ashbury scene. Once, during an after-party, Clapton found Janice alone on a rooftop with a bottle in her lap, singing quietly into the fog. They didn't speak much, but he sat beside her, lit a cigarette, and listened. In that moment, she sounded more honest than anyone he'd ever heard. He remembered the smell of the city, beer, sweat, smoke, and how her voice rose through it like something holy and broken. Janice didn't sing to impress. She sang to survive. To him, Janice wasn't just a rock singer. She was a blues preacher with a bottle in one hand and heartbreak in the other, a fire that never cooled down. She lived fast, gave everything on stage, and left nothing behind but smoke, silence, and songs that still echo. And then came another voice, one with fire in her slide and soul in her silence, Bonnie Raitt. If there was ever a female version of Clapton's own guitar and grit journey, it was Bonnie. Her slide guitar playing made him look twice. 2 volts. Her vocals made him stop cold. There was something in her tone that reminded him of the Deep South. Dusty bars, worn-out amps, and a voice that carried more history than any textbook.
Which I've developed as best I can. It could, I mean, if I hadn't spent all that time that I did, getting off my head, I may be a little bit better.
They met properly in the early 18th, during a benefit concert in L.A. Clapton watched her from side stage, stunned by her command. Later that night, they shared whiskey and stories about their mutual love for the blues. He was struck by her calm presence, her total lack of ego. She talked about Mississippi John Hurt like she'd known him, about Muddy Waters like a friend. Her roots ran deep. In the years that followed, they occasionally crossed paths at blues festivals and award shows. Once, in New Orleans, they ended up at the same late-night jam session in a smoke-filled bar. Bonnie took the stage, plugged in, and played a version of Love Me Like a Man that left even the old session players silent. Clapton joined her for one song, a slow, aching 12-bar blues, and when it ended, he simply nodded. The words, "Just respect." They never recorded together, but that didn't matter. Clapton always said she didn't need his spotlight, she had her own. To him, Bonnie was the embodiment of taste. Never flashy, always felt. She didn't chase the crowd, she led them, with soul, skill, and steel beneath her fingertips. Then came a force of nature wrapped in sequins and scars, Tina Turner. She didn't just survive, she soared. Tina Turner's voice hit Clapton like a fist, but it wasn't just the sound, it was the story behind it. He knew what it meant to fall, to break, to fight back from addiction and despair. And Tina? She made survival sound like a song. In 1986, they performed together at a private charity event in London. No cameras, no press, just raw music. Clapton remembered watching her rehearse in heels, commanding the room like royalty. She was fearless, controlled, drenched in purpose. After the show, they sat backstage and swapped scars. His addictions, her past with I. No pity, just mutual respect. Two survivors, talking like veterans of the same war. In the following years, they often crossed paths at festivals and industry events. Once in Paris, Clapton found himself unexpectedly seated next to her at a dinner honoring blues legends. They talked late into the night, not about fame, but about fear, about pressure, about how music had saved them both more times than they could count. He admired her discipline, her resilience. She trained like an athlete, rehearsed like a soldier, and performed like a goddess. She once told him that every time she stepped on stage, it felt like redemption. Their friendship was quiet but deep. A shared language of survival bound them. Clapton respected her beyond the music. She was fire, she was form, she was freedom. And then there was a voice like no other, a voice that twisted melody into poetry and made silence feel sacred. Joni Mitchell. She wasn't blues. She wasn't rock. She wasn't folk. She was Joanie. Clapton loved complexity, and Joanie gave it in waves. Her guitar tunings, her lyrical mazes, her refusal to be boxed in. She inspired him more than most people knew. The mid-17s, they spent a weekend together in Laurel Canyon, talking music and listening to old jazz records. Clapton confessed he couldn't decode half her chord changes. Joanie laughed and played something even stranger. They never collaborated, but the conversation stuck. Her unpredictability challenged him. That weekend stayed with him. They talked deep into the night about everything. Art, aging, fear, addiction. Clapton was going through a dark spell at the time, and Joanie, with her piercing calm, seemed to see through him. She didn't try to fix him, she just listened. And then, when the silence stretched too long, she played. He recalled how she sang a quiet, unfinished song while seated on the floor, barefoot, lost in her own world. He didn't know what the lyrics meant, but they broke something open in him. She wasn't performing for him, she was being. To Clapton, Joanie wasn't a genre, she was a universe, a reminder that the deepest truth in music sometimes lies in what you can't explain. And when it came to raw honesty, dressed in a leather jacket and eyeliner, there was only one name that came to mind: Chrissie Hynde. Clapton respected edge, and Chrissie had edge for days. She was punk without posing, rock without pretending. The Pretenders' frontwoman came out swinging in the late 17s, and Clapton couldn't look away. They met at a BBC taping in 1981. She was rehearsing. He watched in silence. Later that night, he sent her a note. "You remind me what honesty sounds like." She kept it. That encounter sparked a quiet but long-lasting admiration. They weren't close in the traditional sense, no tours, no sessions. But there was a thread between them. Occasionally, their paths would cross at events or backstage during festivals. Clapton always made time to stand in the wings when she performed. He liked the way she didn't try to seduce the crowd, she challenged them. Once in New York, they ended up sitting side by side at a Lou Reed tribute. After a few drinks, they slipped into an unfiltered conversation about the state of rock, the weight of legacy, and the pressure of staying true. Chrissie, blunt as ever, told him she'd rather be hated for honesty than loved for playing nice. He never forgot that. There was something in her voice, cool, sharp, but aching underneath, that reminded him of the British blues scene at its most honest. She didn't chase popularity, she chased truth. And truth, Clapton always said, was the only thing worth plugging in for. And finally, among all the icons, came a younger voice, fierce, grounded, and already timeless. Susan Tedeschi. The youngest on his list, but no less fierce. Clapton saw in Susan a new wave of soul-drenched rock that honored tradition without mimicking it. Her guitar playing? Clean, expressive, tough. Her voice? A slow burn that could knock down walls. And more than that, she had sincerity, that elusive quality he knew couldn't be taught. They toured together in the early 2000s. Clapton was struck by her humility. Susan didn't demand attention, she simply commanded it. One night after a show in Chicago, they stayed on stage long after the crowd had left, jamming with derrick trucks and laughing like old friends. Clapton remembered how her solos told stories, raw and unfiltered. There was a night in Austin he never forgot. After the encore, backstage was buzzing, but Susan sat quietly, barefoot, playing a gospel tune on acoustic. He sat down and joined her, just the two of them, their guitars whispering truths words couldn't reach. In that moment, it wasn't about careers or fame. It was about connection, about two musicians speaking the same emotional language. She didn't ask for praise. She earned it. Clapton said watching her play reminded him why he picked up a guitar in the first place. She brought soul back to the stage, not the kind that begged to be seen, but the kind that needed to be felt. Susan didn't just carry the torch, she lit her own path. And every time she played, Clapton felt the fire grow a little brighter. Eric Clapton has played with legends. But when he talks about these women, there's no ego, just reverence. These weren't just influences, they were lifelines, compass points. Each of them marked a turning point, a revelation, a reminder that rawness and refinement could live side by side. They didn't just sing, they meant it. They told the truth when it wasn't popular, bled on stage when the world preferred gloss. For Clapton, their music wasn't background, it was bloodline. It reminded him where he came from and where he needed to go. And in a world where rock was often written by men, these women carved out thunder with nothing but a voice and a will. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't ask for space. They took it and filled it with soul, wit, grit, and defiance. To Clapton, they weren't the exception, they were the foundation, the proof that strength had many sounds, and that truth could wear lipstick, leather, or nothing at all. And when he plays with all of them echoing in his strings. In every solo, in every bend, in every blues-soaked run, he carries their spirit forward, not as tributes, but as companions. Because to him, these women weren't just artists, they were the pulse of the music itself.